Welcome to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast where seeing things differently inspires limitless possibilities. This podcast is being brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Limitless was created in order to inform, educate, entertain, and share stories from within the blind and partially sighted community in order to show the world that the opportunities for those who are blind or partially sighted are truly limitless. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, the Executive Director and Founder of Blind Beginnings, Shawn Marcellet.
Welcome back to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Marcellet. Thank you for joining us again this week. We've got another great episode. Today, we're talking about babysitting, particularly babysitting when you are blind or partially sighted. And I'd love to introduce my co-hosts for this conversation, Nika and Jill. Welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello. Can you maybe start by reminding our listeners your level of vision?
So I'm Jill. I am totally blind. I have an eye condition called retinopathy prematurity. So I was low vision growing up, and now I'm totally blind.
I'm Nika, and I was born with Peter's anomaly. I do have some remaining vision. I have most of my vision in my left eye, and I can see shapes, colors, and light, but I can't see small details unless I'm super up close.
So Nika, can you maybe tell us why you wanted to talk about babysitting on the podcast?
Yeah, so I think babysitting was something that I've kind of always wanted to do ever since I was 12. Probably because I kind of just see myself as naturally a very maternal person, and I like taking care of other people. And I took the course. I remember I took a course as soon as possible. And I even took a first aid course later on. And as I was kind of looking for babysitting jobs, a lot of people told me that I was very qualified and overqualified, but they just couldn't trust me because of my disability. So even though on paper, I kind of had above and beyond all the credentials, other people would get babysitting jobs, and people in my school and in my class would get babysitting jobs. And I kind of knew them. I knew the type of lifestyle they had and the type of things they do and the type of personality and maturity level they had. And it kind of frustrated me that other people were getting babysitting jobs and I wasn't. And even though I was qualified, and am I sounding completely narcissistic here?
No.
Oh, Nika.
I think the way you were saying it was fine.
Nika, you're my favorite person.
But yeah,
I love how wonderfully honest you are. It's great.
Yeah, but this kind of stemmed from a lot of that. And it's kind of frustrating hearing someone say that you're qualified for something, but just because of something that you're born with out of your control, you basically can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad that you've brought this topic to our attention, and I'm sure that you're not the only person who's had that experience. But I thought it would be good to have the perspective of somebody who has babysat with a visual impairment and somebody who would like to, so we could sort of talk this through. So, Jill, what was your babysitting experience?
Yeah, so I actually, like I said before, I was low vision and am now fully blind. So I actually have experience babysitting in both situations, which is perhaps a little bit unique. But when I was younger and low vision, I would babysit a lot of the time with my twin sister. We would get babysitting jobs together because there were maybe 2 or 3 kids. So there were a few times, I think we babysat for 2 younger, a little girl and boy for 6 months or something, every twice a week while their mom was working. So we had a lot of experience with that. And then I also babysat, there was a next door neighbor, little girls who we would babysit a lot. And then through them, I got a job babysitting an actual baby, not just little kids, but actual baby by myself. I think I was 14, 15. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking because it was most of my babysitting before that was with my sister. And then where she kind of, I guess due to my visual impairment, I couldn't always see, like the dials on the stove or something to cook some dinner. So she would take on those kind of roles, as where I would just kind of play with the kids while she made dinner or whatever, right? So this is kind of my first actual job where I babysat three little kids, the two little neighbor girls and their friends, like their friend who was a baby. And I was all of that by myself. So it was a little bit intense at the time, but it worked out pretty well. And then when I became fully blind, after I adjusted to all of that, I babysat my younger cousin by myself because my sister and two older cousins fell asleep. So I had to babysit the younger one, which was really cool actually, because she knew that I couldn't see at all. And she was, I think, 4 at the time. And I was 15 or 16. So she understood that I couldn't see and actually listened really well, which is helpful because she wasn't always the best at listening otherwise. And I also have experience babysitting my 2 nephews, being fully blind as well. So yeah, that's kind of, I babysat quite a bit, I guess, mostly when I was low vision, but I do have some experience being fully blind as well.
Yeah. I mean, when I was a teenager, I also babysat. I think most of my babysitting came through people I knew. So my cousin and friends of my parents as kids. And then a little bit of, I don't know, like word of mouth kind of gets out that you babysit. But I definitely, like when I first started, it was definitely people who were connected to my family. And I feel like they actually reached out to me and asked me to babysit. And at the time I was partially sighted and kind of like, well, I guess if they think I can, then I shouldn't worry about this. But I did get into a few little incidences in my babysitting experiences, definitely. And I guess I also come from the perspective of being a parent and hiring babysitters. And I have actually had 2 babysitters for my son who are partially sighted. So I certainly wasn't concerned about that when I was hiring a babysitter. I think there's a lot of other qualities that are maybe more important than whether you have vision or not. But maybe we should talk about that. Like, what do you think? Like, Nika, you mentioned you had the training. What other qualities did you feel you had that would have made you a good babysitter?
Yeah, so I had both the first aid and the babysitting training. I think kind of basic life skills are pretty important. So at the age of 12, for example, I wasn't really able to cook or use heat, but I was able to, let's say, make like a bagel and put it in the toaster, or make like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for kids, like if they're hungry. I think there's also a sense of just responsibility, especially when you're left alone taking care of like, little lives basically that are completely relying on you. I think balance is another one, because I think kids sometimes try to take advantage maybe when parents are away. And it's finding that balance of not being too strict, but then also not letting kids get away with a lot.
Yeah, I definitely, when I was looking for a babysitter for my son, I wanted somebody who was reliable and responsible, mature. I think also like a good problem solver or resourceful is really important. Like, things happen unexpectedly with children. And if you panic under pressure, then you're going to be in trouble, right? And even if you are visually impaired, then if you can't see what the kids are doing, you need some strategies. So like, I'm curious, Jill, when you were babysitting multiple kids, did you have strategies to keep track of everybody?
Yeah, kind of. Thankfully, like I ended up always kind of finding ways that all, like, me and the kids would be doing something together. So we would play a lot of like board games or watch a movie, or like we played a lot of hide and seek or like tag or what's that game? Oh, it's like, I think the red light green light game where like one
Go
person's
stops.
like yeah, or like what times am I? We played all these little games that were very like interactive, and everyone was playing together and took turns, and they got the chance to be like the one leading the
Mhm.
game, or they would come up with ideas. I kind of ended up doing, whatever the kids wanted to do. But I also tried to make it where we could all do it together. So they were at least all in the same room with me, which made it a bit easier because then I could keep, like we're all in the same room. I know where you are. I know what's happening. Like you're not, getting into
Mhm.
something that I don't know what's in the room, right? Like we were all kind of staying in the kitchen or living room for the most part, where I knew the room, I knew what was in there. I knew, what was happening. So thankfully that worked out pretty well.
Keep them
until
talking.
until one of them gets on a fight and they go run away and pout, which wasn't always fun. But thankfully, like the house wasn't always that big, and they were, thankfully kids are pretty easy to, talk to, and like you can figure out what's wrong and try and figure out a way to make it better. So like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I think we were playing, I forget what we were playing. We were playing, I think, hide and seek once, and one kid was upset that she didn't get her turn to be like the seeker or something. I can't remember exactly, but she was upset and like ran to her room and like slammed the door. I'm like, okay, not happening. Mainly because like I didn't know what she was doing. Like she was kind of a little bit sneaky sometimes too. So I'm like, okay, like we're gonna not have this happen. And then I ended up just like going into her room and like we chatted and she calmed down and we went back and played. And she just wanted it to be her turn, which is totally fine. And it was her turn anyways. So, all kind of worked out in the end. But that was always kind of my strategy, I guess, was to try and get everybody in the same room. One, to make it easier for me so I knew where they were. But also, like, I don't know. A lot of the time, I feel like kids just kind of, well, this could be projecting a little bit, but like kids kind of just play on their own. So they really like, and even from my experiences having babysitters growing up, you love when the babysitter plays with you, not just sits there and like, go play and they're on their phone or watching TV or something. Like being a kid who had a babysitter and being a babysitter, like I always thought playing with the kids and like, making them part of it, or like if they wanted to help cook or we went tobogganing or something, like it was always something that they wanted to do and we could do together. But the babysitter was always involved with that, was always really important to me. And also having being a fun babysitter and like, what do you guys want to do? And like if they couldn't come up with an idea, like I had a whole list of ideas of stuff to go do that they might not have done a lot, or, the two kids that my sister and I babysat for a long time, like they hadn't really gone tobogganing a whole lot. So we took them to our house, got our toboggans and went tobogganing for like a couple hours. And like, it was super fun. So like, it was that was always my strategy, just trying to get everyone in the same room and do something we could all do together, because that way I knew what they were doing and where they were, which made me more comfortable as being like a visually impaired babysitter. So yeah, which kind of worked out, thankfully in my case, but
that's like so fun and interactive. I love it.
Yeah. And like, that was like a lot of my babysitters did that with me and my siblings growing up. Like, we would always go on the trampoline or come up with these new games or something. And I always thought that was really important to do as a babysitter, just to, be fun and get everyone involved and do what the kids wanted to do, especially whether it was just sitting there wanting to draw or go outside or whatever. Right. So,
Jill, did you have any people express concern about your visual impairment when you were babysitting?
I think, funny enough, I think it was more my mom who was a little bit concerned. And I think it was more so just because like I had never done it, especially when I babysat by myself. If my sister was babysitting for someone else, or she had gotten a part-time job earlier than I did. So then she's kind of done with babysitting. So I think my mom was much more concerned if, it was dark outside or it got dark and got late and I couldn't see something. Like I think she was more concerned about that, or like, oh, like, how are you going to cook them dinner if you can't like use the stove or see the stove? Like, there's so many other ways to cook than just using the stove. So my mom was a bit concerned, but she's also pretty like, show me what you can do kind of mom, right? So she let me figure it out and do it, and it worked out. But I don't really remember or know that. I don't think any parents that I had babysat for really had much concern. Mainly, like a lot of it too was because me and my sister babysat together most of the time. So like anything I couldn't do because my visual impairment, my sister could take care of. And at the time, she was a bit more of the, I guess, leader out of the two of us, you could say. But even when I babysat by myself, like it was only for a couple hours, or they already had dinner prepared for the kid for, like for supper, so I could just had to heat it up or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was really depending on like what the parents already had going on and prepared. But I don't think, I mean, I was low vision at the time, and I'm pretty sure they all knew I was low vision, but I don't think they really realized how much I could or couldn't see, because I didn't have a cane or use any like voiceover talking technology or anything like that. So I'm pretty sure they all did know I couldn't see fully, but it was never like just never seemed like a big deal at that time. Being fully blind was maybe a little bit different, but yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about when I started babysitting and just some of the challenges that I had around my vision. I think it's interesting you're mentioning the whole like making the kids dinner and just like not being familiar with someone else's kitchen.
Yeah.
Like even the help yourself to whatever snacks you want when you're like, you don't know where things
what do you
are.
have?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to start opening up all the boxes and sticking your hand in to find out what they are. So
yeah.
That was definitely a bit challenging and just, kind of knowing where things were. I remember one of the kids having an accident that required some pretty serious cleanup, but I didn't know where there was like rags to clean up, so I'm using toilet paper to try to clean something that required a lot more than toilet paper. So good times.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I remember like when I babysat the baby for the first time, I think I babysat for her like, I don't know, 4 or 5 times. And then I ended up getting a part-time job, so I stopped babysitting. But like she had to be around a year old. Like she wasn't old. She was still in diapers. She was still drinking bottles. And like that was the first time I'd ever dealt with an actual baby to babysit. All the other kids were like, at least 4 or older usually. And like thankfully they were kind of like working on, I don't know what it's actually called, but when the baby like you try to get the baby to fall asleep by itself.
Okay.
I don't know what you call that. So they kind of told me that was what was up. And if she like cried for a bit and then stopped, then she was fine. But if she kept crying and crying and crying, then like, go check on her. But thankfully they were only gone for like a few, not even 5 or 6 hours, like under that. And she would cry a little bit and fall back asleep. So kind of like, I didn't really have to do much with her, thankfully. But like I was prepared to do it. I was a little nervous, but they showed me like, here's the diapers, here's all the wipes and stuff. Here's the bottles, how long we warm it up for, like, here's the bibs, whatever it was. Like, it was nerve-wracking because I was only 14 and like the only baby I'd ever experienced was my cousin at the time. So, and like, I just kind of held her. I didn't really do anything like that with my cousin. So like actually babysitting a baby for the first time was kind of nerve-wracking, but I like, fortunately and unfortunately, I didn't have to do a whole lot with her, I guess. But there were also 2 other little girls I was babysitting at the time who were like, I think 4 and 6. So they were more of a handful than the baby actually was. So, and like that was a lot to babysit 3 kids at once by myself, low vision. But like it all, there's the little girls, I was maybe just watching them while they went to sleep and their parents went up for dinner and came home. So it wasn't a huge deal, but there was, I miss my mom kind of thing, and some tears and some pouting, and
I'm guessing there was a lot of multitasking involved.
Yeah, thankfully the baby was easy and just would, go back to sleep. But then the 2 little girls were like, I mean, it was mainly just when they actually settled down for bed, got them ready for bed, then they would cry because they missed their mom, which like fair enough. But so that was like the biggest thing I had to deal with really. But it was a lot to babysit 3 kids at once by myself. That was like only a couple times I think I had to do that. Usually if there was, more than 2 kids, my sister would come with me or I would go with her. Her and I made a pretty good team for babysitting. But yeah, I don't know. Those are the biggest issues. Like, it's more just, thankfully I had a lot of experience with the parents already having, like I said, dinner or snacks ready for the kids, or like, hey, there's this and this in the fridge if they're hungry or whatever. Which like I kind of liked that the parents did that because it made it a little bit easier for me to know, what the kids could eat and couldn't eat, or like I don't have to worry about if I didn't know there's an allergy or something, like, like,
yes,
because kids don't always understand that they can't eat something because they have an allergy if they're kind of young. And like sometimes if the parents are in a hurry, they kind of forget to tell you some info, or you forget to ask in the moment. So like it made it easier when they said like there's this and this and this if they're hungry. Right. So it kind of, I was really lucky, I think, in that way, that the parents usually had the food kind of prepared already. And like I never really had to, it was pretty easy. I don't know. I never really had to deal with like any big accidents. I think the only like kind of not accident, but like kind of surprising thing was, I think one of the little boys was getting ready for bed, and he was in the bathroom changing his pajamas, and he ran down the hallway like streaking, like no clothes on. It's like, oh, there he goes. Like, okay, come back here. You have to get your pajamas on. Like it was so funny actually. That was like the only thing. He was like 4, so he didn't really care, but it was really entertaining. So thankfully I didn't really have to work. Like, I don't know. It wasn't really, most of my babysitting jobs that I can think of right now are pretty easy. And again, being low vision, like I didn't really have to like, search around for a lot of stuff. Like I could just open the door and see, oh, there's the broom, or, there's the kid's sippy cup, whatever it was. But again, like being fully blind, that one time where I babysat my like 4-year-old cousin, because my other 2 older cousins and sister fell asleep and I had to watch her. Like she wanted to go outside really bad and wouldn't stop bugging me to go outside. So I just kind of said like, hey, like we can go outside, but we're on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So you can't run away from me because I don't know where the hell you're going. Like you cannot go into these trees or over to the barn because they're animals and I don't know if they're nice or not. So I explained to her, like, if I call you, you need to come to me. And we ended up playing like kind of like a game in the yard where she would run around me and I had to try and grab her, like catch her. So it kind of ended up being like I could hear her the whole time anyways. She ran up to like, I think it was a motorbike once. And I'm like, okay, what are you doing? And then she just wanted to sit on it and pretend she was driving it, but obviously didn't know how to drive it. So it turned out to be okay. But it was a bit more nerve-wracking for me, especially going from low vision than to fully blind babysitting. Thankfully, it all kind of worked out for me, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I feel like that's where one of those like child leashes would come in handy.
Yeah, you don't tend to use those in your own yard.
Yeah, and thankfully I knew the yard pretty well, but like I think that was pretty shortly after I had lost my vision too, so I wasn't really used to, I'm like, I think that's the first time I babysat after losing my sight. So I'm like, oh my god, like what do I do? Everyone who's supposed to be helping me watch her is fallen asleep on me and won't wake up because they're dead tired because we had a sleepover the night before. So I have to watch her and I don't know what's happening. Like I don't know, like I think I said before, she's kind of a sneaky little kid, but thankfully when I explained to her like, hey, I'm fully blind, I need you to listen to me, and if I call you, you need to come to me, right? And thankfully I think she got kind of the seriousness of my tone with that and didn't try to like hide on me or anything. And it ended up working out really well.
I had an incident when I was a teenager. I was babysitting. I think the little girl was like almost 2, still in diapers. And I'm like, yeah, I know how to change diapers, no problem, which I did know how. But I did not realize that she had cloth diapers, not disposable diapers. And so it was time to change the diaper so that she could go to bed. And I didn't really, I didn't pay that close of attention to the diaper I was taking off to like try to use that as a guide to figure out how to fold the other diaper to put it on.
Yeah.
I tried and tried and tried and tried. And I had to call my mom, and my mom came, and it was like probably a 10-minute drive from our house where we were, and helped me change the diaper and then left. And I still don't know how to change cloth diapers.
Fair.
She tried to show me quickly, but I was like too stressed out by that point to even retain anything. But yeah, that was kind of like, thanks, Mom.
That's so funny.
No, they're complicated. I was watching YouTube videos on it, and it's a process.
Yeah, disposable is so much simpler.
Yeah, I bet. I actually wanted to mention, so like I said, when I went, like most of my babysitting experience was when I was low vision, but then like after I lost my sight, like I didn't babysit as much, but again, I was adjusting to being fully blind, so fair. And then I ended up moving. I was in high school and then went to college, and it just kind of fell out of my, I guess, repertoire. But I remember, so my oldest sister has 2 little boys, and they're I think 5 and 3 right now. But at the time, the oldest was, I think he was only 3. And my stepdad and I were babysitting him. And of course, my stepdad naturally fell asleep on the couch. So I had to babysit him because he was having a nap. So thanks for that. But I didn't really I hadn't really babysat for quite a while until then. And I'm like, okay, you're 3, you're the cutest kid ever. But like, he knew to an extent that I couldn't see, but it was the kind of, why don't you get glasses like daddy kind of thing. So we ended up and I didn't know their house at the time because they just moved into like a newer house. So I'm like, okay, like, I don't really know your house all that well. Like, my stepdad was there if I really needed him, but I didn't really want to wake him up. So I just babysat my nephew for like multiple hours, and we ended up just like playing. He had this like little racetrack with these little, like, the little dinky cars, like race cars. So we would just like run them down this track, and like I'd make crashing sounds and he'd get all excited. And it was really fun. Actually ended up being really fun. And he wanted to go play outside, and they have this kind of sand table outside. And I knew that most of their backyard was fenced, but except for one spot didn't have fencing yet. So I'm like, okay, we can go outside, but you do not go to that area. And he knew already that he wasn't allowed to go over there. But like, I wasn't sure if he would try anything because he knew I couldn't see, or I'm a new person babysitting him, right? And like, their backyard was scattered with toys. So I'm like, oh God, like, how do I get from these back steps to like the sand table? And it's like in the middle of the yard. Like, oh God, what do I do? And he just came over to me and like took my hand, and he walked me over to the sand table, and we played there for like an hour. And then he wanted to go inside and get a snack or a drink or something. And he just like took my hand and we walked back inside. I'm like, okay, like, you know what's up. It was so cool because he's only 3, and he understood enough to realize that I couldn't see where the things were on the ground or something. I don't even know how he really understood, but he just, very casually and very simply like came and took my hand and walked inside. Cool. And then awesome. They got home with the baby, and like they put the baby on a mat on the floor to like, I don't know, lay there, play around, whatever little babies do. And I had to get up to go to the washroom, and I didn't want to obviously step on the baby on the floor. So I was like, I'm like, hey, like, where, just to the room at large. I'm like, hey, where's Ivor, who's like the baby? And Seth, who's the older one, he's like, here, Auntie, he's over here. He's like, come with me. And he like came and took my hand again and walked me around the baby so I wouldn't step on him. And then I think again later I asked the same question, and he's like, he's upstairs with Daddy. You're okay. I'm like, okay. He was so cute and just like somehow understood. And I was it's kids are very like intuitive. Somehow they just know what's up. And he, just super casually didn't make a big deal out of it. Like, came and took my hand and walked me around. Like, it was cool. And he, I think, thought it was kind of a game. Like, he thought it was kind of fun to help out Auntie Jill, right? So
yes. I think like, also, if kids are having fun with you, like, then they it's like, come over here, come with me. And they come and take you, right? Because they just want you to come. So, and
that makes it easier. Like, I think that might be a bit of if you're a fully blind babysitter, that kind of helps, right? Because like, they want to show you, I don't know, their toys or their books, or I don't know, come over here, let's go play over here. Like, they'll come and like, come with me, and they'll grab your hand and take you. I don't know, after they get used to you, and they know to an extent that you can't see, you don't make it a big deal, and then it's not a big deal from kind of what I have experienced. And like, if you like, hey, where's this? And for the most part, like, a kid is going to know in their own house where things are. Kind of just making that part of it really helped for me, especially being a fully blind babysitter compared to low vision. So yeah.
Playing hide and seek is definitely not my favorite babysitting activity in someone else's house.
No, definitely not. Especially when the kids know where to like the good spots to hide.
Well, and you might know where the house is. Open the door and look in on them and not see them.
Yeah.
And so I would always joke, like I'd make jokes so that they would giggle so I could find them by their laughter. Oh, maybe he's in the drawer of the dresser. Oh, maybe he's like in crazy places that would make them laugh. And that's how I would find my son too when we were doing hide and seek. But
that's so fun. That's a good strategy.
Yes. So I was just thinking about like, how do you reassure parents who maybe are a bit nervous about the babysitter being visually impaired? And I mean, honestly, you're nervous leaving your child with anybody, whether they're visually impaired or not initially. And what I would often do when my son was really little, and maybe even still, the first time having the babysitter come over when I'm home and having them, be together. Like, so just for a meeting to see if they like each other, and you can kind of be in the other room and leave them in the next room over where you can still hear what they're doing, but kind of just see how they interact with the kid, and maybe offering that you would do that a couple times before they even have to pay you, just so that they can get to know you, and you can kind of learn your way around their house and get to know the kid in an environment where you don't feel guilty that you're learning because you're not being paid yet.
Yeah. And like, kind of like what you said too, like at least with a lot of babysitting jobs, it always tends to be, like family or family friends, that, that they already know you, you might not already know their house. Cause like, I found like babysitting jobs are a lot of word of mouth is how you get them, like kind of like we said before. So I find that it really helps knowing, like they already knew me for the most part, not all of them, but like, be family friends or friends of a family friend who I'd babysit for or something like that. So it kind of helps like that you like, at least for me, especially babysitting like my nephews, for the most part, I already knew their house and I knew how my sister kind of organized her house. So I knew where things were, not always, but enough to kind of get by. But yeah, like that's the big thing with babysitting. It does tend to be a lot of word of mouth. So like you already kind of know the family, the kids, possibly even the house. But I think like with reassuring them, I think like I really like the idea of like getting to know them before you actually do the babysitting job, like you mentioned. And like I said, like if you don't make the blindness a big deal, it usually isn't that big a deal once they see how that you can like interact and play with your kids. And like I said, like I liked trying to get all the kids in playing the same game in the same room. And I think like having that be like, what the parents would see when they got home, or before like I get there a few minutes early, like maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes early or whatever, while the parents were still getting ready to leave, and like, okay, cool, like I go in the other room and play with the kids and we do whatever, or I kind of go like join in what they were already doing. And then even in that few minutes before the parents left, like they would see you interacting with the kids and playing with them and chatting with them and treating them like normal little kids. Like I think it kind of like helped them be more comfortable just by even just for a little bit seeing you in that situation, right? And like even like when the parents are kind of walking around like, hey, like food's here, whatever's here, like they'd explain like the kids go to bed at this time, whatever it is. Like you don't make it like, obviously it's okay to ask questions, but you don't make it like a big deal. And you kind of act like, I just found like kind of acting casual and comfortable and like responsible, and not acting like doing your best to not act nervous or like fidgety, and just like acting confident and responsible helped reassure the parents quite a bit.
Yeah, because I feel like that's always just kind of the problem I had is I feel like there's people who almost freak out when I cross a road by myself. So it's almost like if you have people who think you can't even do that for yourself, how do you convince others that you're capable of taking care of like younger children?
Yeah. And a lot of that is just like, it really depends on the people, like the person's views on blindness, I guess, as well. Right? Like everyone in my kind of, well, I grew up in a really small town, so everyone kind of knows everyone. But like a lot of the people I babysat for already knew me, or knew of me at least. And like most people knew I couldn't see it all that well, but it was mainly just the print side of things was my most, like mainly my struggle at that time. So it never really like appeared to be a big issue for them when they saw me just doing stuff around town. And like, I don't know, they already knew that I like, I could do this and this and this, and all I could really do at the time was read large print. So if I like, if the kids wanted to watch a movie, I would get like, if I didn't know how to run their TV or DVD player or whatever, the parents would show me, and I would just like, hey, so it's like the top left button for power, and then like, okay, so the like, the third button in the left on this row is like the play button or whatever it was, right? So I couldn't see the actual like little symbols or letters or stuff on the remote. So I would just kind of I kind of did what I would do myself at home with their TV and remote and stuff. And then like if I, wanted to find a TV show, I'd have to walk up really close to this TV screen to read like the TV guide or menu. It's hard because everyone's views on like blindness are so different. And when, like Shawn, like you said, like it's hard enough leaving your parents alone, or your parents alone. Sorry, your kids alone with someone who you might not really know or be comfortable with yet. Like, obviously, I'm not a parent yet, but like I can imagine that being really difficult. So like I think a lot of that, Nika, is like kind of their perspective on blindness to begin with. It's hard to change people's perspectives on that, but I think like having the confident and like responsible air to yourself, even though if you are nervous, kind of helps a lot.
I think confidence is so important. When I think about the babysitter that I chose when my son was a baby, and she does have a visual impairment, but she is confident and she's resourceful and smart. And I just knew like if there was a problem, she would, even if she didn't know what to do, I knew she would call me. She would figure it out. I think that's, and I didn't know what I was doing when I was babysitting. Like I was just figuring it out. I think the parents were more confident in me than I was in myself, honestly. But it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I don't know. Like once you know the kids, it gets easier once they kind of know you. But yeah, it is fake it till you make it a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't necessarily babysitting per se, but I remember like when we have family friends and stuff, and when we have parties at our house, it kind of just naturally fell on me to like wrangle the younger kids in my room. And I remember like one of them was like begging me to do makeup with her, and like her mom was like, oh well, that's okay, which word of advice, always ask the parents permission if the kid wants to do like makeup or nail polish or something. But the mom was like, oh, like, okay, but like this is kind of going to be a bit of a disaster. And like, I don't think you can teach her how to do makeup and stuff. And I'm like, oh no, I'm like great at doing makeup. I can teach her how to do her makeup. And we kind of went there, and kind of like what you were saying, making it into a game. I was kind of like, oh, let's match the makeup. Let's remember, put it back where you found it. Oh, if you put it back where you found it exactly, like you'll get like a star, like a virtual star. And I had like stars on my iPad, and I'd like give her stars and stuff. I guess that like reward thing really motivated her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember I was babysitting like my little cousin. Well, you're kind of your similar situation, Nika, where like we were all at my grandparents' house, and there's like a ridiculous amount of people at my grandparents' house. And my cousin really wanted, like she was 3 or 4 at the time, and really wanted to play, but nobody, like the rest of us cousins were a lot older than her. So nobody really wanted to go play with a little kid, right? And she was so bored and so little and just, wanted to be included. So I'm like, all right, Sam, let's go play. And she loved to do people's hair, like her favorite thing ever. But, like if you're a teenager, you don't want a kid messing up your hair. But I could have cared less. I hate doing hair anyways. Sure, go do my hair for me. So she did like the most wild, crazy, like I think she put every hair clip and hair tie in my hair that she could possibly find. And like, I think there was like 5 hair bands. And she's like, let's go show everyone. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And she like walks me out of the room, and my hair is psycho, like crazy. And like, she's just so happy. So it's like, it's really fun to like see how happy they get when you just let them be a little kid and do your crazy hair. And like she loved it, and everyone kind of everyone giggled like, oh, your hair looks so crazy, like what the hell. But she was so happy, and like it kind of made it like not embarrassing, like you guys, whatever, like not a big deal. She had fun. And then she went and like took all of it out for me and like brushed my hair for me, so I got it's nice and relaxing for me. So it's kind of like, it's nice to have them, like included, like I've said before. And like, they kind of know what, like kids always want to, especially when they're younger and they're one of the only younger kids, they kind of want to just do what everyone else is doing and be a part of it. Right. So like, yeah, sure, you can come help me cook, or if you want, like go grab your stool. Like, I know you have a little stool and a little apron, so sure, come help me. Right. And like include them. And that's all they really want. And they just want to do what you're doing. So it always kind of makes it easier, just because then where they are and what they're doing too.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah.
So
Well, even
similar
like
idea.
the parallel, like kind of the parallel play, like that family friend, she like her whole thing was always just wanting to be more grown up than she was, be like me. So like she was like kind of, jealous that I had a credit card. So like I kind of drew like a fake credit card for her. Like
Yeah, that's cool.
she like saw me on my cell phone, like taking pictures of like her makeup because she wanted them. So then she kind of got that. So like I gave her my iPod, which kind of is a mini like little cell phone. And it was so like rewarding seeing her go upstairs and like kind of prancing around, showing off like all the glitter everywhere. Like everyone was like, "Oh, you actually did a good job." Like, she doesn't have dark red lipstick like smeared all over her like forehead.
I think that's the first step, Nika, like building a relationship with somebody, and you connect with the kid and the parents see that, and you spend some time alone and the kid doesn't die. And and then that's the gateway to like them thinking of you as a potential babysitter next time, right?
Yeah, because like the only really thing that happened was that dark lipstick she was using, she kind of got the lipstick and like smeared it on like a couple other pieces of makeup, but that was like pretty easy to clean off. Like,
Yeah.
Kids are messy.
Another option, if it is a family friend, is to offer to babysit at your own house. If you're more comfortable in your own house, like that can throw off routine. Depends on the age of the child and the time of day.
Yeah, it's also hard if they're like all our family friends like do trust me. I think it's also like they live really far away.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It has to be convenient for the parents to like pick you up and drop you off easily, or for you to get there. Yeah. Lots of things to consider.
Well, and I remember for me when I would babysit, especially when I babysit by myself, like a lot of the time, like depending on where I was and how late it was going to be, because my parents never really gave me like a time frame to stop babysitting. Like I could babysit pretty late if I needed to.
Yeah.
And I was comfortable with that. And I remember the only thing ever being that I was uncomfortable with it being late at night is that if the parent like who I was babysitting for offered to drive me home, I'm like, I can't see where your car is outside. It's too dark. So
yes,
I was very night blind. Like even when I was low vision, obviously. Now of course I am. But when I was low vision, I'm like, especially if they didn't have like a porch light, I'm like, moonlight, not bright enough. So I would kind of like follow them so I could at least see their shadow. And then like, they go open the door and the light would turn on in the car. So I could like, okay, and like run to the car so I could,
yes,
before the lights turned off. So that was my only ever like, I think major like low vision issue was trying to find the car at night once I was done babysitting.
Yeah, and you're kind of like, they haven't figured out how low vision you are.
Yeah.
And now it's the end of the night.
Yeah.
And you can't find the car. and you're like, oh no, busted. Like now they're gonna realize.
Yeah.
And thankfully, if it was my mom picking me up, she would kind of like purposely turn the light on in the car so I could at least like be a little moth to the flame there and like, find the light. But if it was like the parent driving me home, it's like, okay, I think I was kind of like, okay, like, oh, just like go ahead, I'll just be a minute. You can get my stuff. I'd make up some kind of little excuse like, oh, like I forgot, my bag or something. Like just make up a little thing to quickly like reach back and grab it. So they had a head start, so I could just kind of try and follow them. But thankfully, nothing major happened in me stumbling into the car scenario. But it's funny because with the kids and stuff, I don't really, aside from like a couple kids trying to escape like from the bathtub or something, like, I never really had any major issues. Oh no, that's a lie. I had one little girl fall and scrape her knee because she was trying to balance on the curb of the sidewalk, or the lack thereof sidewalk. And she fell and scraped her knee, but it was like a little scrape, and like I knew how to go clean a cut, right? So the parents come home and she has a really fun, I don't know, I think it was a Frozen band, like themed band-aid on her knee, and she was really happy that she had a themed band-aid. So she went to show her parents, like oh no, like they know I hurt their child. Like, you had to go show off your band-aid. And then they're like, oh, what happened? And like I'm like, oh, am I in trouble? Like what if they don't want me to babysit because their kid got hurt? Like, it's only a little scratch, but still. And the kid's like, I was walking on the edge and I fell. It was my, like, I wanted to see if I could do it. I'm like, yes, you kind of threw yourself under the bus. It's not my fault. Which is kind of fun. You know, you kind of go through those things in your head as you're in the situation. And the parents like, oh, you're fine. They never said anything to me about it, really. Like, it's,
well,
so it was fine.
Like, it's natural for kids to get hurt, and that's kind of like the whole like natural consequences. Like, oh, now you balance on the edge of the sidewalk and
like, as a babysitter, you're like, oh my god, like, you just got hurt. Like, are you gonna be like a tough, like, I was kind of like, oh, you're fine, you got it, like, it's all good, we'll go clean that up. Like, I also find, like, if a kid falls or gets hurt, like, the way you react affects the way they react a lot of the time. So if, like, they fall, they're like, oh my god, are you okay? Like, oh my god. If you kind of freak out, then they're gonna freak out more. As, like, where if you're like, oh, you fell, you're good, right? Like, you're okay, let's go clean that up. Like, you kind of don't make it a big deal, then it's not, after a few little tears, it's not really a big deal. And I always found if they got hurt and had to get a Band-Aid, they could pick out the fun Band-Aids. So then they were happy that, like, I have a cool Band-Aid and you don't, like, kind of thing, right? So it always kind of helped diffuse the, oh my god moment there. But
yes.
Shawn, I was wondering, did babysitting ever prepare you for having a child later in life? Just because I feel like the thing with babysitting is, if you're kind of having an off day, you can be like, oh, at least I get to go home. But then with the parent, it's kind of like a full-time job. So how similar and how different are they?
Yeah, it absolutely did not. Not at all. It's so not the same. I mean, I think, I knew how to change a diaper, although I don't think I'd ever changed a newborn diaper. I'd never bathed a newborn baby. I'd never been sleep deprived. Like, when it's your kid, you just kind of learn as you go. And I don't think the babysitting experience I had helped me when I first had a baby. Maybe, having experience with kids might help you when your kid becomes sort of more of a person, like 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. If you have some experience working with kids and entertaining children and things like that, and just comfort around kids. But when it's your own kid, honestly, you're learning every single day. And I don't think anything can prepare you for becoming a parent. It's quite a shock to your system. But at the same time, it was both harder than I expected and less hard than I expected. And I don't even know how to explain that. Like, harder in that it's just all consuming, but the blindness piece wasn't really part of the hardness. Like, it was just, it's just a huge adjustment, I think, for anybody becoming a parent.
Yeah, well, like, my whole thing kind of thinking about babysitting versus parenting was always kind of like, oh, well, if you babysit once and don't like it, that was only a few hours of your life. But, like, once you become a parent, you can't return it to the store like it's a comforter.
That's very true. That's very true. And I know people who, when they're feeling a little bit like, oh, I kind of want to have a baby, they'll babysit somebody's baby and be like, yeah, I got my fix, I'm good for a while. It's good to spend some time around kids, definitely, to see if that's what you're going to want to do, but it's never going to be the same as having your own. So yeah, it's not like, I don't know, a piece of clothing or an appliance that you can return if you change your mind.
Yeah, it's like you've entered an 18-year contract.
If it goes way on that.
Yeah.
You never stop being a kid to your parents, it turns out. I mean that in a good way too. But
yeah,
I'm 25 and my mom's still like, hey, like, let me know if you need anything. Like, every couple of days we chat. Like, she legit came and visited, I think last week or the week before, and she's like, write me a list of things you want me to do, like, help you do. I'm like, I don't really need you to help me do anything. She's like, but I like to. I'm like, I'm your mom. I'm like, okay, like, go for it. But it was pretty, and like, she's like, I know you're 25, but I still want to help you with stuff because I'm your mom. I'm like, okay, works for me. But like,
yeah,
yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah.
My mom still helps me with stuff too.
Right?
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for
so does
sure.
mine.
Definitely beyond an 18-year
Definitely.
contract.
Yes. Well, thank you, Nika, for bringing this topic up. I hope that, I don't know, I hope you get an opportunity to babysit if that's something you're still interested in. Maybe some of the ideas we've suggested would help next time the opportunity arises.
If I have a child one day, Nika, you can be my babysitter.
Yeah, I can. But they can be my guinea pig.
There you are. Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks, Jill, for joining us and sharing your
course.
experience.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Limitless, the Blind Beginnings podcast. If you have a question, a comment, a future topic request, please send us an email to limitless@blindbeginnings.ca. Please share our podcast with a friend, like, subscribe, give us a rating, and join us next time.
This podcast has been brought to you by Blind Beginnings, an organization based in Vancouver, Canada, that supports children and youth who are blind or partially sighted, along with their families. Music for this podcast is composed by Shawn Bishop and Clement Chow. Production and audio editing by Rob Minot. For more information about Blind Beginnings and the work it does to support children and youth who are blind and partially sighted, along with their families, visit us on the web at www.blindbeginnings.ca, and also remember to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time.